Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for June 13th, Tuesday. So one of the week's events are out of the way. We got the CPI report, which was widely expected for one of the events this week, and we've got plenty of other events that are going to transpire this week. So CPI report, I'll just glance over this really quick. To me, most important is the new data, right? So the month over month data. This month came in 0.1%. That's been a lower trajectory than what we've seen. That's the overall month over month number. Ex food and energy, or the core, I think people are referred to that as that came in line with expectations. So still, there are some stubborn areas. Rent, labor, the services side has been kind of stubborn in terms of inflation, but we are seeing, of course, that inflation number come down. There's also the year number, which is just basically, the average of what's happened over the last year. And I think if you look at this is a point that we've been making for a while. But you're going to get some of these months that roll off. Next month, specifically, this 1.2 is going to roll off. It is just the year over year change. So the number will come down once this 1.2. Notice that the 0.9 was no longer in the calculation. Once the 1.2 comes out of the equation, you're going to see inflation, the year over year number, drop. So, of course, we've got many other things for tomorrow, specifically, well, the PPI report, I would pay attention to that too. They're expecting the number to be negative 0.1%. And then we've got the Fed decision at 2 o'clock. And then sometimes what could be even more important is the press conference, which is at 2:30. So I think that's one of the things. I'm just going to pause here for just a quick second. By the way, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going to go through in this video is for information purposes only. But really, that's kind of the big question: is the Fed going to derail this move? And I think the press conference is something really to pay attention to. What they say about the future path of interest rates is going to be important. And yeah, you might get some whipsaw move. I think at this point we've had a pretty healthy rally, but I think even if there's a little bit of a check back to support or a little bit of a dip, I think that will be healthy for this market at this point. So before I bring up, sorry, I'm just dealing with a new configuration today, new PC that I've installed, so I'm getting used to it. But here's the interest rate expectations, right? Again, this is what the market is expecting. For tomorrow, this is really decreased, right? And this, is one of the reasons I think why the market rallied some, is that they're no longer really pricing in, from where we were this weekend. I think it was about a 30% chance that the market was implying that they could raise interest rates tomorrow on Wednesday. That has now dropped to 12%. The July is still stubborn, so it could be that they skip and that they raise in July. I mean, we'll hear more about that tomorrow, and the market will adjust to what Powell is saying. But that's what the expectations are. Just right now, a 13% chance that they're going to raise interest rates tomorrow. I thought this was very interesting. Someone shared this with me, and I'm going to point it to your attention too, because it will give you a good expectation. This is from Bespoke Invest. They talked about what the performance is. This is the last 6 meetings, and they've shaded what it looks like after the post meeting, or the post announcement. So we get the announcement at 2 o'clock. The press conference starts at 2:30, and then the whipsaw moves begin, and then the market decides what direction it wants to go in, and then it really goes. So, this will be something, if we do get that initial reaction. And I remember specifically, I told members, I said, hey, you could kind of play this both ways, right? You could buy a little bit of calls, and then you can also fade the market. And I had mentioned, if it wasn't the last meeting, it was the meeting prior. I said, hey, if you want now, you can fade the move. Not too many people wanted to do that, but that was a good move. So number one, I think, for what to expect tomorrow, whipsaw move, right? Number two, realize that, again, this isn't 100%, it's just the 6 past meetings, but the initial direction always isn't sometimes what we end up doing. So for example, here the initial move was lower, but then it was higher, right? And I think this sucked some people in, right? And then we ended up lower. So, in my opinion, don't get sucked into the first, first or even second second move. Be patient with what you're doing. And like I said, I think that if we do see some type of a market dip, having that dry powder in this environment, I think is very important, because that could really lead to that could really lead to some good market opportunities if you've been waiting to get into some names. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about today's market moves, but I think very important is to talk about the Fed meeting for tomorrow. We also had a couple other events today, right? And before I get into the performance, we could talk a little bit about that with AMD. So, what I had a couple people ask me about this because I tweeted about AMD. They're like, "Geez, what happened? Why did it go down 3.6%?" Well, this is something that if you've been trading for a while, you should know this behavior. What's the behavior in trading? Because it happens over and over. It's buy the rumor, sell the news, right? As soon as an event gets announced, we saw this with Apple, for example, right? When they announced their developers conference, developers, the stock rallied into the event, right? And anticipation of something interesting being announced, right? And then once it moved up, from what price was this? Like 175, to 186, made 5 to 10% move, right? That announcement is already being priced into the stocks. Remember, kind of think about stocks as being future. They somewhat are future looking, right? So they take that information and they price in that event really quickly, right? And then once the event comes out, right, sometimes it's a disappointment because A, the stock has already rallied, right? And B, sometimes the expectations are higher than what they're going to actually announce, right? So this is trading 101, guys. This is something that, in my opinion, you really want to take note of if you haven't before, because it happens all the time. So AMD, right, rallied into the event, and it was a great trade. We saw call buying towards the end of last week, and we saw call buying towards the end of last week, and we saw put selling. I got into that name and I unwound it yesterday. Right? I could have actually held to this morning, and I talked about that in the trading room. But here was my trade specifically. Bring up AMD, and you could always search and you could see the trades. You could pull in any ticker that you want to, or you could just search our trades channel. But, so this was, I added this back in the middle of last week. Sometimes I say this, sometimes a day trade. Well, if it works out really well, I'll hold on to it. And I did that, right? I took a target on this thing, took a quick target, and then I decided to add to it, right? And I said, you know what, I'm gonna, I think I saw more call buying on the tape, and then I kind of turned that into a swing trade as I kind of thought about the trade a little bit more and said, hey, there's an event for the following week, and there's bullish option activity. Both calls and puts were both bullish in this situation, and I rode this all the way up to 126. Now it's trailing stop. Whoops, I took it all the way up to 129, right? You can see I took a lot of targets along the way, right? That's sometimes, if I'm feeling like there's a lot of events like there are this week, I'm going to be a little bit quicker with the trigger because I didn't really want to own a lot of risk going into this week with a lot of events. But yeah, so I took this thing off yesterday at 129. Now, like I said, I didn't catch the tippy top because it went a little bit higher. Wow, it almost took out that VPOC up there too. Interesting. I didn't see that, but there it is. There's the virgin point of control, came very close to touching that. But yeah, and then I don't even want to be in the name for the event, right? It's great, to kind of sit and watch and maybe get your popcorn ready. But in terms of trading, the move happens before the event. Not 100% of the time, but many times. And I wanted to talk about NVIDIA because, we talked about them in yesterday's video. And I thought that this was the best looking semi name in terms of, a trading setup. And there it is. There's the break of the value area. Hesitated a little bit there at the version point of control takeout, short term 1 hour, and now it's testing new highs. So I did take a target in this today, right? In this, go back to the trades channel just to give you a sense of what I'm doing here. Oh, why won't this work here? What's going on? Why can't I get to the bottom of this? Oh, geez. All right, there we go. All right, this should be at the bottom. But yes, I took a target right in the beginning of the day. And now, I've locked in some profits, and now I can kind of leave the rest for running. I also got out of a couple other trades to ENTG, which looks fine, but you have to pick and choose a little bit, right? So trade management too, which I'll cover a little bit here. But one of the things that I said to traders is, if you've been accumulating positions, make sure you spend some time every day as you get closer to the end of the day, go through your positions and figure out which ones that you really like, that you really want to hold on to, that you're okay maybe adding if the market dips a little bit, versus ones that you're just basically, more of a tourist in. You're in for a couple days. You're in for, catching some momentum, right? Those are the names that I usually cut, especially when we've got a lot of events, with hence tomorrow's PPI and FOMC, and then on Friday we get quadruple witching too. So that's the name of the game, right? Is always trading and risk management, right? And understanding the relationship and what you're holding as well. So a few other so that was, I think, very interesting. And one of the events today was that was the AMD. And also, a couple other things that we noticed. If you look at the performance for the day, right, there was a little bit of rotation for the day. Part of this also had to do with China announcing more stimulus, or the possibility of more stimulus. If you look at the outperformers for the day, this is something that we talked about in the pre-market session. I said I wouldn't be surprised if it is more value areas of the market: energy, banks, industrials, metals and mining. If you look at some of these names, how they did for the day, steel names were up 2.4%. So this is now the third time that this has worked, where if you hear about possible stimulus in China and they talk about the real estate sector, the go-to names are going to be the industrials and some of the steel names. That has worked pretty well. And I'll continue to trade that trade until it doesn't work anymore. And we did see some call buying and so forth. Still, my favorite, so here's what the XLI ETF looks like. By the way, I looked at the overall 52-week new high list. There is 54 names on the technologies area that includes software, semis, everything in tech. 54 names made new highs today, 52-week highs, and 50 names in the industrial group. So right now, that's the second best group. And you could see the industrials are trying to break out here pretty decently. This has also seen some call activity too, but take a look at this weekly chart, right? This is the highest point so far this year in the industrials ETF. And I like this setup. The other ETF that you keep hearing me talk about in these videos is one that you probably haven't, if you're a new viewer of my videos, you probably haven't heard about this ETF, but it's AIRR. What the hell is this thing? Well, this is the Industrial Renaissance ETF, right? It's got a little bit more names, like, smaller names like Hubble, right? Have you talked a lot about this name, Hubble? Probably not too many people have talked about it, but nevertheless, there's a lot of strength in some of the, like nitty gritty, I call them nuts and bolts industrial names. And, this is one that's been breaking out. So that's one name that's an AAR. Another name that I like too is Atcore, right? Which we made some money in a couple of weeks ago. I took off this trade and it's still going. I did add it to a longer term portfolio, but I think this thing ultimately gets up to 145. Caterpillar, right? I think also took out that virgin point of control. So target realized to the upside. Real nice move here from 215, trade up to 245. Boeing, I think, still looks great. Had an inside today, and I added the trade. I have this now on 2 places, but you know, a little bit of an inside day today. Perfect little dip. They announced deliveries today, and I really like as I mentioned in yesterday's video, really like the long-term trend in this. It looks it looks very good if it can manage to stay here and rally a little bit more. One other group that I wanted to mention too, we'll keep this video try to keep it a little bit shorter than yesterday's, is the clean energy group. That's the second day in a row that we've seen clean energy stocks on the top of the list. Very, very strong. And there's a chart that I have for this, which I find compelling, which is clean energy versus the traditional energy ETF. That's XLE. This is the 5-year chart of PBW versus XLE. Remember, this was a huge outperformer back in 2020, and then it basically collapsed, and you started to see more traditional energy names perform better, especially in 2022. Not so much in 2023, but 2022. If we focus in here, so remember, like all the way back here in 2021 is where price broke the 200-day moving average. Now look at what's going on. It's almost there in terms of turning the corner and getting it back above the 200-day moving average in this particular relationship. Remember, I'm looking at one versus the other. You know, so you know, there may be some opportunities here, right? Even though the ETF still isn't that appealing to me, looking at the weekly chart and looking at the daily chart. Let's see if I can. This will bring up. Here's the daily chart, right? It's still below its 200-day moving average. It could certainly rally more before it hits resistance. But I would rather, at this point, I would rather go through individual names and find them out. One name that I like a lot is this FLNC. This is on our watch list for the week, right? This looks different to me, you know. So again, that's the power of doing your own analysis and going through and looking for leaders within groups. And I think this name is pretty strong. Just came out of this consolidation, and I think it ends up going up to 3180. This same was on our watch list to start the week. I showed this yesterday, so I don't mind showing it again. But notice how well our watch list is performing. You know, again, we put a lot of names on our watch list because we want to really take note of, you know, where there could be momentum and where there are leaders within this market. But you know, here's the Caterpillar that was on the watch list. There's the FLNC that I just mentioned, and then we've got a bunch of different you know, semiconductors that are on here as well. And then there's a bunch of other names. You know, I traded today, and this is sometimes how I'll trade things. You know, I thought that there would be momentum in some of the material type names like Alcoa and FCX, but this was just a day trade for me. Why? Because for me, I only swing trade names that are in uptrends. This name is not in an uptrend, but thought it could catch some momentum. And you could see I got rid of this one. You know, this is my first trade that I got into today, and I took this thing off. Somewhere in here today. Here we go. So yeah, trailing stop hit. And that's the right way to manage trades, you know, especially, you know, having a trailing stop and watching it. I also took a target in Celsius today. I also looked, this will be maybe the last area that we talk about, but I really like what's going on in this lithium space too. Even though this did not break out of value for the day, I think it's a one to watch. LTHM is another lithium name, had a really strong move. I know a lot of people are watching this one too, ALB. Again, still in a downtrend, but moving quite nicely here. And then another one to watch in the space is LAC, also in a downtrend, but can maybe move out of that consolidation. So that's it for today's video, guys. Again, a lot of nice rotation, a lot of participation in other areas. That's what we really like to kind of counter on when we have days where there's both economics and there's something like, you know, stimulus being announced in China. And, you know, we know what areas to kind of go into or where to kind of look. And plus we kind of look for a little bit of option activity to confirm that for us too. All right, guys, that is it for today's video. Have a great night. And if you're not a member of Tribeca Trade Group, check out TribecaTradeGroup.com. And I appreciate it if you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.